to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you. I know it's been like a long time coming. We were kind of talking a little bit before,
Mhm.
but I guess just to kind of start things off and get things going to hear like your story. How about you just introduce yourself and take some time to share, maybe just about your background, about why you chose to come on the podcast today. I know we had your lovely wife not that long ago on our show, so excited to hear from you as well.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. My name is Brayden. I grew up in Southern California. My wife, she also grew up in Southern California. We met in Provo. I was going to Utah Valley and she's going to BYU. We got married in 2021. So we were one of those COVID relationships, and we just actually celebrated 3 years of marriage this week. So that was really,
Ooh,
really fun.
congrats.
Thank you. We've got a dog named Tuck. I'm sure she probably talked about him too. But currently we're living in Washington State, up in Seattle. I'm going to the University of Washington, getting a master's degree in health administration, and
That's
it's been a fun
awesome.
ride. My whole undergrad experience at Utah Valley. I was always pre-dental, and there's a lot of stress behind that. And she helped me make the
For
switch
sure.
to healthcare administration. So we're happy to be up here. We live with family currently, which has been really fun as well. And yeah, no kids yet, but um,
You have
hopefully
your dog's
eventually.
basically a kid.
Yeah, the dog's
It's
a
good
kid.
practice.
It is good practice. So yeah, I'm excited to see what this next phase of life brings. I've been in school like my whole life still, and it feels like I'm not an adult yet until I'm graduated with my master's. So kind of a weird mentality, but um, I served a mission in South Carolina from 2015 to 2017, and that was Spanish speaking. Um, and yeah, that was the best. That was the best 2 years for my life. And my story today kind of spins off of that a little bit. Um, and yeah, it's a little bit about me.
Oh, thank you for sharing. That's so cool. I remember talking to Amy about your guys' move and whole thing to Washington. It's very different from Southern California and from Utah.
It
So
is.
I'm sure but it's fun. You have family there, so it doesn't feel like you're kind of, isolated out in the Pacific Northwest. You definitely have like your support there. So that's really great. I'm also from, I don't know if Amy told you, I'm also from Southern California. I'm from San Diego area. And
Oh,
so when we
sweet.
talked, she was like, you lived like around the corner, basically, just down the highway, but it's just a close city. So it was just really cool to connect over that. We kind of talked about California before we like hopped on and recorded our episode together. And it was just cool bonding experience. Like, oh yeah, we totally miss San Diego. It's the best weather. Like, so definitely that really, really miss it. But Utah's nice too. But I'm so glad that things are going so well up there. And I'm excited to hear about, your mission experience and your story surrounding that. So I guess let's just jump right into that. Like
Cool.
what I guess led you into that point, and just tell us about your story and about your why. Brayden, love to hear what you have to share today.
Yeah, thanks. Um, so all growing up, I'm the oldest of six kids. All growing up, my family was very active in the church, and like my dad, he taught gospel doctrine, he taught seminary. He'd also fill in for seminary classes when I was in high school. So that was pretty fun having him teach that early in the morning and take us every day to seminary. Um, and then my mom, she was in like state primary presidencies and she taught as well. And so growing up, like, my parents had us memorize all the articles of faith before we got baptized. And we always had family home evening. We prayed together every night as a family. My parents did a pretty good job of trying to instill the gospel into our lives. So from a young age, I remember having it was maybe like 6 or 7. My parents got me a little like pin, more like a plaque, I guess, that said like future missionary or something on that. And so I'd
Yeah,
wear that on my little suit to church every Sunday in primary. And
love that.
so I always knew that I wanted to serve a mission, and a lot of that was like I don't know. Maybe there was an expectation that that was the case. But my dad, when I was little, he'd always tell me, my brother. So I have one brother and four sisters. So my brother and I
Oh,
would
wow.
always, yeah, it's a lot.
That's awesome.
My brother and I would always have the same room together. He's just 3 years younger. So going to bed, my dad would come into our room and tell us his mission stories, and he had some funny ones. He served in Bolivia, and so random stories of people on the bus doing crazy things or him teaching people. And so that, like, those stories kind of set me up with that excitement of, oh my gosh, like I can do that one day. It's so cool. And
Right,
so
of course.
I got my call to serve in South Carolina. And I was a little bit bummed at first because, all my friends got calls to serve foreign. I don't know if any of my high school buddies went stateside, but I am glad I went to South Carolina. It was a wonderful experience. So got to do Spanish speaking. Went to Mexico MTC. Um, so September 30th of 2015, I got to the MTC, and the last day in the MTC, I believe, was November 9th or 10th. During that time, so this is where the story like switches a little bit. So during that time, in November, the church came out with policy. I guess secretively. I don't know all the things behind it, but where part of it was you can't baptize the children of LGBTQ parents, and I know that didn't sit well with a lot of members of the church, and especially
Right.
my parents were part of that
Hmm.
feeling. And that same time, I don't know if it was November or a few months later, the church released those gospel topic essays that a lot of people talked about a few years back. And so my
I think I
parents,
remember those. Yeah.
yeah, so it was a big thing because it was the church being transparent more so than it had been, according to
Hmm.
my parents, I guess. I didn't know any better because, I'm on my mission. And so
No, for
they
sure. You're
started
in your little
diving in.
mission bubble.
Yeah, exactly. So they started diving into those and looking more into church history, and that they um let's see. So for about a year and a half, maybe a little bit less, they were like in deep in this church history, and they decided that like it wasn't really sitting well with them. And so um fast forward to 7 months before I come home from my mission, I get an email from my dad, and his email was really kind of like um, off the cuff. He was talking about how he didn't like believe in the Book of Mormon anymore, or he said I don't remember what he said, but he said something that made me think that. I'm like, do you not believe in the Book of Mormon? And he was talking about like similarities with the Book of Mormon and other books, and like plagiarism. And then I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what? And so I emailed him back and I was like, do you not believe in the Book of Mormon anymore? And I remember like it was approaching like 6 p.m. So our P day was then over. And so I got off my email and I was like still confused. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And so um we had iPads at the time, so I got on Wi-Fi when I got home before going to bed and just like downloaded the rest of the emails that were probably from him. And I read some
Hmm.
more. And my mom had sent me an email, and she's like, well, I didn't want to like tell this to you right now, but your dad kind of forced my hand, and like we've been researching, and we decided like the church just isn't for us right now. And I'm like, what? Like, what do you mean? Like, what the heck?
Oh my gosh.
And so I was very confused. My parents had prepared um, my mom prepared like a 14-page letter that she sent in the mail right away to me that week. And so when I got that letter, I read it and I was just like brokenhearted. It felt like a giant bomb
Yeah. Oh
dropped in
my
my life.
gosh.
So pretty much the letter outlined what my parents like had been researching the last year and a half, and like how they felt about the gospel now and about church. And it was all like opposite of what they've been teaching me my whole life. And so as a missionary, I'm
Right.
like, what the heck is going on? Like my parents, like they're leaving the church. Like what? Like what? I had no idea. Like so,
Hmm.
it was interesting because one, what they taught wasn't what they believed anymore, and I'm like, I'm here because of that, because of what you guys set me up with when I was a kid. And then the other thing that was interesting was like I had no idea the entire time because they've been so supportive of me and my mission, and they responded to all my weekly newsletters, and they were so excited for me, and like they I mean, they helped me and they encouraged me. So that was a little bit weird, but I remember I was sitting. So we had just going back. One of my best friends, or became my best friend. He was my trainer, and then we were companions again for his last part of his mission. And he had just gone home before I got this letter. So like transfers had just happened. I got a new companion, and we didn't really get along very well. And so when this all happened, I just felt like lost. I was like, oh my gosh, I have no one to talk to, and here's this guy I don't even like. And my parents said, or my mom said in the letter, she's like, don't tell your mission president about this because then he'll tell the stake president. And so at this point, they're still like, these kind
Oh
of went less
wow.
active. And so now I was worried, like, if I tell my mission president, then like the stake president's going to talk to them. They don't want that. Like my people pleasing self was like, I can't do that. And then I just got to thinking, I'm like, you know what? I got to tell somebody. Like I need help. Like I need
It was
support. Like, I'm
heavy.
not doing
Like,
good.
well,
So
like a heavy thing to have carry on your shoulders. I feel like just kind of knocked you cold. You're like, whoa, 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 what just happened?
I know that's how it felt. That first night from receiving that letter when I kind of felt alone. I just like I went. So we had a one bedroom apartment, and my companion was in the bedroom. I just went out to the living room for a long time and just like knelt down and was like praying and like thinking. It's like, how could this happen? Like, what the heck? And I remember, so like before my mission, my little sisters, I don't remember how old they were because I don't want to do the math right now, but they're pretty young. They're in primary. Like they'd go up and share their testimonies at the pulpit, and like it was so sweet and it felt so genuine. And I was just like, how the heck can that like, how do they go from that to like nothing? Like what the heck? And so I just remember like just crying my eyes out that night and just thinking like, what in the world is going on? And I I remember like journaling. I was trying to journal. I was trying to do anything I could to like justify what's been happening. Just like because it all hit me at once. And I remember there was a hymn
Did you
that
tell
came to my head.
anybody?
What?
Did you end up telling anybody?
Yeah, so I did tell my mission president, and it was good timing. We had mission wide interviews that week in our zone, so he was gonna be up here anyways. So it allowed us to talk a little bit. Um, but I I when I that first night there was a hymn that came to my mind, which is "Abide with Me," and one of the lines is like the darkness deepens. I don't even remember. I have to sing it all the way through. But anyways, there's a line in there where I felt like it was me that was writing the hymn, and like God was saying like just abide with me, or I was saying abide with me, and I felt like God was reminding me like, hey, like it's gonna be okay. Like you're in a good spot right now. You're doing what you're supposed to, and it kind of brought some peace to me, which was very nice. And then I'll get to that later. There's another part to that. But I did talk to my mission president, and he helped talk me through some things. And um, I it what the biggest impact was like on the missionary work. Like I feel like a few weeks after that happened, I just felt like dark and just I had doubts and I was confused. I'm like, why the heck am I here? Why am I teaching about the Book of Mormon? My parents don't believe that. Like, do I believe it anymore? Like if they taught me all these things were true and now they don't believe it's true, like, do I believe it's true? Like, what the heck is going on? Um, so that was a little bit of a struggle. So I had to try to pull myself out of that to still be an
I
effective
don't blame you
missionary.
though. I don't
Yeah.
blame you. Those are very valid feelings to carry with yourself just because of, how you were raised. So it's very, very valid.
Thank you. Yeah, it's true. Like, um, and at the time, like, I wish I would have, um, I don't know, been at a better. I don't want to say regret where I was mentally, but looking back now, I'm glad it happened the way it did. But there was a shortly after this, a church, or maybe it was for missionaries or maybe young adults, but it was a session with Elder Eyring and I think it was Elder Holland, where they were talking to the youth, and I think they call them face to faces. I don't remember 100%.
Oh yeah, I loved those. Those are really nice.
Yeah, I don't know if they
Like a
still
good
do them or
Q&A
not.
type of thing.
Yeah, I like those. So this one was in Palmyra, and maybe I'm getting my facts mixed up here. So, but anyways, it was Elder Holland was there for sure, and I remember he was saying like he mentioned like struggles with the gospel, and he's saying if you are struggling, lean on my testimony. And I was like, cool, that's what I need to hear right now. So I'm gonna lean on Elder Helen's testimony for the next few months, and that's gonna help me get through. And it did. That along with other experiences. So um, going back to that hymn, my last week on my mission, I was given a talk in sacrament meeting, and the closing hymn for that sacrament meeting was that same hymn that had came to my mind that night, which is "Abide with Me." And I remember I was breaking down because to me that meant like God is aware of me, He's listening, He understands like it's going to be tough, but He'll be there with me to get through it. And so that was a good reminder about to go home. Like, hey, just remember this hymn. And that's not, and this twice since then after my mission that hymn has like helped me as well. So it's cool. That's kind of like a little like a spiritual moment, like a reoccurring one for me. So, um, but I'm gonna go backwards with this. So going back to my why. So there's a point early in my mission where I thought I was going to be sent home, and I didn't, and I'm so glad I didn't, because if I did, I would be at home when this was all going on, and that would not have benefited me, given where I was. Like my testimony wasn't that strong yet early on, and so I needed my mission to um like build my testimony, and that's the foundation for my testimony with my mission. I feel like even though my parents taught me, I don't feel like I gained my testimony until and I one of the reasons why that I guess I stay is because of my mission experiences. Just to share a few, I remember we were in an apartment complex, and we were looking for a Book of Mormon referral. And our thing in our mission was, if you got a referral for a Book of Mormon or a New Testament or an Old Testament, you knock on that referral's door and you knock on all the doors around, because you never know why you're sent there. So we did this night. Got up. It was night. I think the third floor. Knocked on the door. No one was home. Lights are off in the entire building. I'm like, what the heck? No, it's only 8 o'clock. What are you guys doing? So I walked down to the first floor, and we were in this apartment complex a few weeks earlier, and I remember there was this African American family, just another building to the left, and so I had the thought to go over to that door and knock on that apartment where they were. And then I was like, no, it's too late. I can do it tomorrow instead. And so I kept having that thought, and I kept pushing it out in my head. And so I was literally walking to the car, then walking away from the car back to the apartment. And my companion's going like, what the heck are you doing, dude? I'm like, well, I'm having this thought. Like, well, we should go do it then. I'm like, okay, sounds good. So I knock on the door, and this guy answers it all like surprised, and he was like, "Yeah, you can come in." I'm like, "Oh, sweet, this is great. This worked out." And he was telling us he had just prayed to like have some more direction in his life. He's like, "When I finished my prayer, you
Oh
guys
wow.
knocked on the door," and I'm like, "What? No way! Are you kidding me?" So
It was probably a freaky experience for him. He was like,
I
"What?"
know, isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
He's a devout Muslim too, and so he had the
Really?
Quran out, and I was like, "This is
Wow.
crazy!" Like what? So that experience was one of the several that taught me that like prayer is real, prayer works, and that's one of the foundations I think of my testimony, is that God will answer all your prayers, not in the time you want it necessarily, but the time that you need it. So
Mhm.
nothing came out of that with teaching him, but it was a really great experience, and I'm sure I mean, I hope he remembers that experience of praying and then having us knock on the door and sharing a message that night. So that was one that was really cool. Um, and just like on top of that, the power and the spirit that I felt in lessons, especially speaking Spanish, like early on my mission when I didn't, I mean, being in the States, it's a little bit harder to become really good really quick at Spanish. And so there were lessons where I was like struggling through it. And then there came a point where I like began to testify or I don't know, say something I felt like I should say. And all the words just felt, just flowed through my mouth. And I'm like, this is not me. This is the spirit helping me out. This, like, there's no way this is me. And so experiences like that where we're finding people that at the right time, we're in the right time at the right place, we're teaching, we're feeling the spirit, like those all kind of set me up for like this is why like the gospel's true. Like there's no way we're out here every day from 10 till 9 at night trying to find people to teach, praying to find people to teach, praying to prepare for what to teach in lessons, and then being led to the people that like are asking for direction and having powerful lesson. Like there's no way that that's not real. There's no way God's not real if we're all communicating to the same person and we're getting this stuff done. Like come on. And so that really like when I yeah, so like when I struggle, I think of that a lot. Like he's directing his own work and we're just there. And it's really easy. Like I remember coming home, like it's so easy just to get caught up in church culture and to, I don't know, listen to other things that just aren't necessarily like this is the gospel. Um
Mhm.
and
What was that like for you when you came home? Like that,
yeah,
I'm kind of curious. Kind of want to
yeah.
know, like, how were you welcomed when you came home? Like, how was your transition from all of that spiritual high? Just because I served a mission myself, and I remember like coming home and I'm like, whoa, this is way different than what I've been doing for the past 18 months. So I like to know, like, how was that for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my whole mission before I knew my parents were leaving, I was like, oh, I'm so excited to come home and get my brother going on his mission and like get my sisters to go on their missions and like I was pumped to be like the teacher of the family.
Right. Are
And so
you
when
the oldest?
I am the oldest, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So knowing beforehand things were gonna be different, I kind of prepared myself mentally for that. I mean, I couldn't really prepare super well because I didn't know how different it was gonna be. Um,
Right. Of
but
course.
but one more thing before the home part, my parents they had heard stories from I don't know if it was groups they were in that were like also leaving the church or if it was their friends that had left
Mhm.
that when they had told like their kids that they were leaving that their mission presidents had said like hey you need to like stay away from your family like they're bad for you and I was like who says that like what like my mission president didn't say that um and and I'm like, that's so
Oh,
that was
that's
a
a
fear
little
they
odd.
had that I would come home and like pretty much reject them because I was still a member of the church and they weren't. And so when I emailed them back
Huh.
saying like, hey, like I still love you guys. Like this doesn't change our relationship just because you left the church. Like that made them break down um because they were thinking the worst. So I thought that was interesting. But um when I came
Wow,
home,
that's kind of opposite of what I thought that they would say, honestly. That's oh
yeah,
wow.
yeah, I was shocked too. So I'm like, wow, how would you think that? But I'm glad that
Mhm.
wasn't an issue anymore after I squashed that feeling, I think.
Mhm.
But when I came home, I it was weird. For some reason I had expected them to still do family prayer. I remember asking my dad, because like I said before, we were super good at that all growing up, like always family prayer before we go to bed. And I asked my dad,
Mhm.
I'm like, do you guys not say family prayer anymore? He's like, well, it caused so much contention to try to get someone to pray, and so we just stopped. I'm like, that's bullcrap. I'm a missionary. I've heard all the excuses. Come on, that's bull crap. And then I remember I when my sisters were in bed, I went upstairs. I'm like, hey, you guys want to pray? And I was being like my missionary self. I just gotten home. I didn't know any better, so I wasn't aware maybe like how that made them feel, or like because they've been out of the church for like a year and a half or something. So
Oh, okay.
and so
Yeah.
I had them pray, and then my mom and my dad talked to me. They're like, you know what, like you probably shouldn't do that. I'm like, okay, I understand. Like I'll respect like what you guys want, but it was like I wanted to be there to teach and to like share. The worst part was I couldn't share everything I learned with them because I knew they like didn't believe the same things I believed anymore. And although my dad had um, very similar mission experiences, I just felt like there's a disconnect there. So I felt like sad that I couldn't open up about all my spiritual experiences because they wouldn't be revered the same way that they would have been had they still been um, believers in the gospel and members of the church. So that was tough. But
Mm.
like I never held it against them. Um, I know my
Did it like
mom.
wear you down at all at some point? I feel like I know. I just feel like a bit bottling all those experiences that you had, 'cause kind of you're a new person,
Yeah,
after that point, because that's what you were doing 24/7. And I'm just curious to like it get you to a point, or like what did you do? Just I just because I'm thinking like I wouldn't even know what to do at that point, honestly.
yeah. I was lucky that I went off to college 2 weeks later after I got home, and so
Oh, that's way quick.
yeah, that's way quick. And I say lucky because I had I stayed around, I don't know what the conversations would have been, how I would have felt, given they had like a new way of life, and I was still a member of the church. So I was glad to be like immersed into the Provo scene, and where like I did feel understood because everyone there, not everyone, but I'm saying like the majority, you're served missions, you're
Right,
still part of the church,
right.
like you're in your YSA awards. So being part of that culture really helped. I think keep me up. I did like they, my mom specifically would still like talk crap on the church or would bring things up. I'm like, Mom, I don't want to hear that. Like, I can you respect that? I mean, I'm not trying to preach to you the things that you used to believe. Like, I don't want you trying to like preach to me these things. And there's like her and some other family members who had also left the church, that were part of extended family. They'd say little nuggets of like a little comment here and there, like about the temple or about something else, and I'm just like, I don't like that. Like that's just so disrespectful. And so they've since cooled off on that, which has been good. But um, yeah, it's it's no longer weird to me. It feels normal now. Like it's just
Mhm.
like I'm in the church, Amy's in the church, Amy's family's in the church. I have some extended family that are still members of the church. But I don't know, it just kind of feels normal, and like I'd love to have like those deep gospel conversations with them, but I know that's not going to happen, and maybe it'll happen in 30 years. Who knows? But
That's true. You never know.
yeah, but it's been helpful just being able to reflect on that time, and like I think my patriarchal blessing as well helps kind of keep me centered. It's like, you know what, this is where I need to be. Like I think about a lot. I'm like, I believe Jesus is real and God is real, and they answer every prayer. Like when I read the Book of Mormon, I feel something, and that's the Spirit, and I just like I I I love eating it up. And so I like, how can I leave something that just makes so much sense to me? And I've had this thought too. I'm like, am I just trying to stay in the church and be like part of the gospel and understand, or like, am I trying to keep learning the gospel to kind of push, or to be the only one left being like, yeah, I'm still here, like I'm still going strong. Am I just trying to do it for other people? Am I doing it for myself? And I've like come to the conclusion multiple times I'm doing it for myself. Like I don't care what, like, yeah, I care that they're not in it, but I mean, I don't. They do what they want to do, and I can't force them to change. And so I like I love the gospel, and I like being here, and I want to keep learning. And like there's so much more to learn about the gospel, and it just makes so much sense to me. Like it, like
Mhm.
so that's that's kind of the story in a little in 30 minutes, I guess. But yeah.
But I guess I was curious, like, how is like your dynamic with your family now? I know you kind of gave us a little snippet of that, but I'm like curious, like, obviously you love them, you care about them, and
Hmm.
you'll never not, love and care about them. And I'm sure it's really hard to have that, like, there's certain things you can't bond over like you used to. There's certain things that like you maybe don't quite connect over anymore because you have different perspectives on it. But like, how has that like been able to like, I guess I'm curious, like, just I'm assuming that there's going to be listeners that listen to this episode are going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm kind of in a similar situation, or like I've had family recently leave, and or whatever, or I've had a friend leave or whatever. Like, how have you been able to maintain like that? I guess I don't know. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but like it
Yeah.
sounds like you guys have a pretty good relationship despite like the differences. And so, how has that been for you?
Yeah. I mean, overall, I have a good relationship with my family generally. Some people more than others, but that's not church related at all. But it's like just loving them where they're at. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't expect that they're going to join the church. I think if I did have that expectation, I would feel differently. But because I don't have that expectation, I'm just like, you know what? You need to go on your own life journey. You need to figure this out for yourself, like I did. Like my life journey took me on a mission, and I figured it out that way. But I mean, who knows? They could come to the gospel another way down the road. And so
Mm-hmm.
having that mentality, I think, has helped me be non-judgmental. I hope they feel that I've not been judgmental. I don't know otherwise, but that's what I'm going for though. Like there's no point to force something that's you can't force
Right.
change, even if you would love for them
No.
to be there. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the scriptures have a lot of good examples of that. Like Lehi's family, it's like
Right.
it's kind of how it feels. It's like he wanted his
They're a prime example.
exactly. It's like he wants Laman and Lemuel to come, but they won't. So yeah.
No, yeah. No, yeah, I now that you brought that up, it just kind of reminds me of how like obviously it was probably frustrating for like Lehi and Nephi to like, you know, they had all these amazing experiences, right? Like they saw an angel, they were saved from this big storm and everything. There's just so many miracles that they experienced, but they still like couldn't fully believe in the process of it all or believe in God's plan for their family. And I think I like I guess the example that they kind of came to terms that they're on their own life journey, kind of like you said, where it's like it doesn't mean I don't love them. It doesn't mean I don't like support like, whatever they choose to do or anything, or it doesn't mean I don't like care for them and their life because they're valuable to me. But obviously you're still going to like mourn, or you're still going to have those feelings that you're like, man, like there's so much goodness in this gospel. There's so much, love. There's like so much learning and growth. And you wish that's something that you could partake in together. But I think it's really beneficial that even also within the church, I feel like this perspective you have, I feel like should be implemented everywhere. Just like we can't force people to read scriptures more often, right? We can't force people to go to the temple more often. It has to come from that like pure, like personal intention. Just how like you were talking about, you can't force anybody to change. Um, but like I feel like so if we approach people that we see in our congregations as they're each on their own individual like timeline, I feel like there'd be less judgment, and I feel like people would feel more welcome at church, and I
Yeah.
feel like people would feel like they're, I don't know, seen as a whole person and not just like, oh, I'm a member of the church, but it's like I'm a member and it's a big part of me, and it's it gives me purpose, but it's also like I don't know. I think it's just like that building that testimony has to come from within. And I feel like sometimes we're always like, we get very robotic sometimes, like, oh, we should be doing this much scripture study in order to have this level of a testimony, if that makes sense. And so it's like,
Hmm.
I love that you've mentioned that, regardless of, whether you have family in the church or not, or like friends or whatever, that you approach them and see them as, a child of God, and that they are an individual, and then they are on their own timeline. And so thank you for sharing that, because I think that kind of just made me think about how, like in the scriptures, like we were talking about with Nephi and Lehi and Laman and Lemuel and all of them, they eventually found their way, figured out, what they wanted to do for their lives, but that love never ceased. It kept going. Um, but I guess since that point, like how has that influenced just like maybe just your current day to day, and also maybe just how you planned like for the future and whatnot, just with everything you've been through?
Yeah, good question. I don't think it's changed my day to day. Like I do my best to read scripture, just still feed myself spiritually. I know when we got married, one of the things that kept my parents in the church longer than they just were maybe wanting to be, like, have their records in the church still, was the thought of me getting a temple marriage, and they wanted to be there for that. And they weren't in our ceiling, which understandably, because they're not members anymore. But that was a little saddening, I think. But I let's just my motivation for I don't know, it gives me more motivation to, I don't want to say this, to to remember, I guess. When I'm looking back at my parents' experience, like my dad had really amazing mission experiences, and I know he did because he shared them with me my whole entire life, and he journaled about it. And my mom's had amazing experiences, especially with the birth of my littlest sister, which was a miracle baby. And I'm just like, how do you forget your spiritual experiences? And I'm like, well, no wonder the Book of Mormon says all the time, like, oh, remember, remember. Like, we forget so
Right.
easily. And so we
We
have
do.
to try to remember every day, um, by doing those little things. It always goes back to the little things of praying and reading your scriptures. Not just reading, just like, hey, I read a chapter today, but like trying to understand the gospel, that will allow you to change your behavior. And I'm gonna backtrack real quick with one more thing. So before my mission, I had a really good young men's president, and he was a stake president in Sacramento, and then he moved down south. And my dad was, I think he was like the teacher's quorum advisor or something, but we were all together as young men in a room. And at this time, before he was my young men's president, his name's Brother Treadway. He was the ward mission leader. And so he came and talked to our priesthood. I think it was teachers and priests. Is like he talked about missions and serving missions. And I leaned over to my dad. I'm like, he's going to be the next young men's president. You just watch. And he was. And I knew that for some reason. And we actually became his home teachers. And so we developed a really good relationship. And he had a good relationship with all the priests. I think we had like 17 priests in our quorum who were all preparing for
Oh my
missions.
goodness.
So it was a
That's
big
a
group
lot.
down there.
That's awesome.
But we, so he really, like my junior senior year of high school, really like and really helped us understand and put into perspective, like, hey, you're serving missions here pretty soon. Like, get your crap into gear. And he did it in a loving way. And after my mission, he had known what was going on already with my family, and so he was one of the first people that talked to me from my ward. He took me out to lunch, and he told me his experience with his own family that left the church while he was on his mission too. And I was like, oh
No
dang,
way,
like I had no,
really?
yeah, so I had no idea. And so it felt reassuring. His parents, I believe his mom and dad, came back like 20 or 25 years after his mission, and he told me that he was very like missionary like and very preachy with them. I think I'm remembering that right. And so he was telling me just to like love my parents, like love my family. And so that was a big help, having someone already experienced that, and someone I respected greatly and like loved go through something similar. Um, and so that he's been a great example. He's been someone I could talk to about like any topic.
Mhm.
I was struggling with tithing last year, and I called him like, hey, like, what do you think about this? Um and so he's been awesome. So that I think it's important to, like, with people in situation that can be similar to mine, like, surround yourself with good role models and people who are strong in the gospel that can be a sounding board and who do understand you and your experiences and can help when you need help. Because if you don't have that little village, I guess, so to say, like, you're not like it's things could go south if you have a question that doesn't get answered, or you don't have someone to talk to about the gospel. So I think that was really cool. And I don't know, I feel like God put him in my life when he was like at the perfect time as well to be able to help me. So, um, yeah, I think it's all about that.
No, yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I'm glad that that kind of like brought that story back because I feel like now that I feel like you're going to be that person for a lot of people that may be, having a similar experience as you or will, or I don't know. But you actually answered another question that popped into my head while you were talking was like, what, when you come across things, like, for example, like when your family came across, letters and they started kind of diving deep into things and they started doing research and everything. And what made me think of is like surrounding yourself with people that want what's best for you, that surrounding yourself with people that support you, that want good things to happen in your life. And I think that's such an important thing where you kind of bring up the element of always remembering, because that's kind of the essence of the gospel, because we're human, we're going to forget, we're very forgetful people. And we need to have those, that that family surrounding us. So that's why we're organized into wards, into stakes, big congregations, to be able to help each other and lean on one another
Yeah,
and minister to each other. And I'm glad you brought that up for sure, because having those like mentors, like they don't obviously like they can be like your old like young men's president, like for you, and then there can be maybe it was a bishop, or maybe it was just someone you went to primary with, I don't know, and you just connect later on in life, and all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, I didn't realize I could like rely on talk to them about the hard questions. And like, and I think such an example that you like set, Brayden, just with what you do, is like not being afraid to be like, I have questions, I have doubts about this, I don't quite understand this, can you please explain this to me? Whereas a lot of people are like, I don't want to talk about that, that's like, I can't like be like confused or about it, I have to just believe it. And it's like, well, no, God's commanded us to always ask questions. And I say this a lot in like some of our episodes, is like our whole church was restored again because of a question. And so it's like, how can we like not ask questions? And you know obviously, like, we want to doubt our doubts before we doubt our faith, but it's okay to have doubts. That no one's ever said we didn't, it's not, we're not allowed to. But what's important is that we we use that to like fuel our desire to be curious and ask those around us. And and obviously if it's coming from the right places, if they care and your intention is pure. And I feel like um something that you did touch on too, where like, I hope my family knows it's coming from a pure place. And I think so long as it's coming from that pure place, that you guys, it'll always be good between you and your family. And I think they have a really great example of a son to like show them that always love no matter what happens during life, and be that support. So, but I guess to kind of wrap this up, Brayden, I was thinking while you were talking about your story and everything, what is something that you would like to invite those that are listening to your episode today? What should they start doing? I'd like just something an action item that they can start doing today.
yeah. So two things come to mind when you were talking just now, and I think this goes along with this question too, is like cognitive dissonance is uncomfortable, but it's okay. Like two things that are seemingly opposite, you can still both hold at the same time. And just because you've come across new ideas or information that might like contradict what you previously believe, like, yeah, like you said before, it's okay to ask questions, and know that people who come across the same information aren't always going to make the same decision. Like if you're
Mm-hmm.
diving into church history and it's like you're struggling with that, but you also believe like the gospel's true and you've had these experiences, like you don't have to choose to leave. You can still choose to stay. I remember in the Bible, there's a time when Jesus was talking about like partaking of his flesh, and I think it was Second John 6 or John 6, one of those two. And it was a hard doctrine he was teaching. They're like, why am I gonna like partake, like eat you or something? So it was really really weird for them to hear that, and so
Mm-hmm.
some people got up and left. Some of the disciples stopped following him because of that. And so he turns it to his apostle and he's like, will you two, or like, will you also leave? And they're like, no, like we're gonna stay. And so despite hard doctrines or things you just don't understand right now, you can still also choose to stay, um, because of your experiences and because of the testimony you already have, and then just keep pushing forward. So that's what I would That's advice I would give.
Thank you. I didn't even like remember that story in the Bible. I'm so glad you brought that up because it's very true. Jesus definitely shared some things that did not sit well with people.
Mm-mm.
They're like, I don't get it. I don't understand that. And it's okay. He understands in the way he taught back in the New Testament. He expected people not to fully understand the first time, and that's why he kept teaching. And so, and that's why he's like, that's why we go to church every Sunday, partake of the sacrament every Sunday. We read the same scriptures year after year after year so that we remember what he's trying to teach us. And so but Brayden, I want to just say thank you so much for coming on
Yeah.
with me today. It's been such a pleasure. I really was looking forward to listening to your story and hearing from you. I've learned a lot just in what you've shared today and everything. And so I'm also grateful that we have listeners that can listen to this, definitely get something out of it, just be able to build that faith, and that we're definitely needing in these times right now. So just wanted to say thank you again, and thank you to those that are listening, and I again so grateful. But hope you have a great rest of your day, and thanks for sharing your why.
Thank you so much.